Okay.
There we go. Welcome to the CFBHC Award and Bowl Selection Show. I am Dean Craig Pelton. And alongside me are Jumbo and Saluna.
Hey, what's up?
How's it going?
So let's just get straight into the coaches poll first, and we'll just mention the teams that are receiving votes here really quick before we get into the number 25 team. We have Hawaii, West Virginia, Kansas, Illinois, Ohio State, Maryland, Minnesota, and Alabama receiving votes. So the number 25 team in the nation is Vanderbilt.
So Vanderbilt finished a surprising 9-3 this year, and they were 4-3 in conference. They were led by running back Will Craven, a junior on offense. He averaged 5.5 yards per carry for 1,250 yards on the year with 11 touchdowns. And on defense, they were led by a star recruit from last year, David Pennington, true freshman. Only had 3 picks, but 2 of those were returned for touchdowns. So overall, I think Vanderbilt definitely exceeded expectations and kind of an under-the-radar 9-3 finish.
Yeah.
So next up is, I know it's Dean's favorite team.
Oh yeah, the Michigan Wolverines. They had 33 votes. Michigan, they had kind of an up and down season. They started out pretty well with the victory against Notre Dame, then Tommy Football went down. They lost to Georgia Tech. They actually won games against Baylor and Pittsburgh with a 1 out of 3.5 backup quarterback. And then
I don't want to talk about it.
they beat the crap out of Army, and then their offense just kind of faded towards the back half of the season after they beat Michigan State in East Lansing. They didn't show up against Penn State. They didn't really show up at all for the rest of the season. They nearly lost to Indiana. I believe it was almost a miracle that they won that game, if I'm recalling correctly. But Michigan is still the number 24 team in the nation thanks to that win over Ohio State and Ann Arbor to close out their season.
And number 23 is the Boston College Eagles. They received 35 votes in the poll. And so they just got a coach, but everyone knows about their QB, Alex LaShore, Mosi Bartos, who entered the draft early. And on defense, another likely draft pick, Billy Chambers, a senior. He had 8 sacks this year. And they kept it close with a bunch of good teams this year. They beat Clemson, if I'm remembering correctly. They were the team that knocked Clemson out of the ranks of the undefeated. And they kept it really, really close against Florida State. The score was 27-25. And so I think overall a good year for them. Though they're losing Bartos, they have a bunch of backups there. So I think BC is definitely going to be contending with Florida State for the Atlantic next year. And overall it was definitely a good year for them, even though they didn't have a coach for most of it.
Yep. All right, so next up at 22 is the North Carolina Tar Heels. They were led by touchdown Jesus and Pat Narduzzi. And they they are a very good team. They won't be reaching a bowl thanks to the whole scandal that dropped, if I'm remembering correctly. And they don't have their wiki updated, so I can't really talk about their season as a whole right now.
They actually had quite a good season, if I could throw in some information here. I mean, they were undefeated in their division if they had faced Oregon State in the ACC championship game. So, the ACC is kind of a dumpster fire, but they did sweep the division with Jumbo in it, and Trey and NP, Clem, and several other people. So,
yeah, our division does have all the coaches, so fair enough.
So
right.
Next up.
So next up is the Washington Huskies. They received 84 votes in the poll. They finished 3rd in the Pac-12 North this year behind Stanford and Oregon. They were also 9-3, 5-2 in conference. And overall, I would say they had a good year. Their only losses were at Illinois versus Stanford and versus Oregon, so the 2 teams above them, and at a pretty underrated Illinois team, I would think. I mean, they beat North Carolina on the road. They beat LSU at home. And so it's a solid team. Oh, and I forgot. They also upset USC at home in overtime. And so I think TCTY definitely had an up and down year. beating USC and losing at Illinois was something I don't think most would have predicted at the beginning of the year. So good year for TCTY. Probably needs to show some more consistency next year if he wants to contend in the North, but I think it's a year to build on for sure. And next up is...
At number 20, the Iowa Hawkeyes received 96 votes. They started off the year, they were really hyped up going into the season thanks to Slinky predicting them to win like every game. And they started to lose. They lost to 2 Pac-12 teams in Arizona State and Arizona. Then they lost to West Virginia, and they wound up winning out in the Big, which is kind of impressive considering the Big Ten has the reputation of being probably the best conference. But then they lost to Penn State in a very close game. I was kind of surprised that Iowa showed up defensively and shut down Todd Jennings the way they did. So they had a very good season, and I think this is a good ranking for them. They might be a little bit higher in my books just because of the way they started to play. They really gained momentum at the end of the year. So it's a good season for Iowa.
Honestly, I'm actually kind of surprised at Iowa's final ranking being as low as it is.
Yeah.
Because it's actually, I think, fairly impressive to go 7-0 in the Big Ten West. And, they almost beat me. Kind of, I don't know, I guess in the whole chaos of the conference championship week, it was kind of lost on people that I only beat Iowa by 7 points. So I honestly think that they're probably closer to maybe like the 12th rank, somewhere around there, 13th rank. So, I'd be pretty proud if I was J.M. Jacobs. Yeah, he's had a pretty solid season, and he's only going to get better next year, especially with Jarius coming back.
Yep. So next up, speaking of the conference championships, is Houston, the AAC champions. They received 108 votes, and clearly they are probably below Boise State, who they beat in the AAC championship game. And everyone knows about their star players, recruit QB Joel King, and on defense they have Philip Moore, who's a Heisman finalist. And so, clearly they have talent. They won the AAC, even though they're not going to the playoffs. But definitely a year to build on. I believe Moore's coming back because he's only a sophomore, if I'm remembering correctly. And so winning the AAC is good. Do they move to the Mountain West next year?
They do not.
Okay, so they're in the AAC next year. Yeah, so they do have some solid teams to contend with, but at the same time, they won the entire thing this year with some strong teams that are going to be moving out, like Boise State and Hawaii. And so definitely a good year for Houston, and they're going to be looking to repeat it next year with a better Joel King and a better Philip Moore. So I think that's easily doable.
I'm surprised. I think Houston is the next team that, if they get a coach, has a lot of immediate impact, and especially now that we have basically major conferences and 2 minor conferences, I think Houston could fill the role for the next couple of years as the one token minor conference team. It's always going to be near the top.
With the star QB and a star linebacker on defense in a weaker conference, easy. So they'll probably be in the playoffs next year, assuming they don't have a hard out-of-conference schedule.
Correct.
All right, so next up is?
The Boise State Broncos at 18, if I'm correct. They had a very good season as well. They played Penn State closer than most teams have. They only lost by 7. They lost to Hawaii by 2 in a very good game, and they lost to Houston by 1 in the conference championship game. So over the year, they only lost games by a total of 10 points, which is extremely impressive. I think this rank might be a little bit low for them, but I guess people just don't give the AAC any respect at all. But I think Boise State is a very good team. And even without Brian Brown.
All right. So next up we have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish at number 17. They received 115 votes in the poll. And Ape had another, I guess you could call it, decent year. He went 8-4 this year with some tough losses to Oklahoma, Michigan State, Texas, Michigan, although he did have an 8-game winning streak in the middle of that. And I'm sure he'll be disappointed he's not in the playoffs, but I think you can call it a solid year. Senior QB Harold Simmons, I don't think he ever lived up to expectations as a 5 out of 5, but he definitely has been solid for them, and he's moving on to the NFL. You also have sophomore inside linebacker Marcus Grant, who had 62 tackles, an interception, and 2 sacks on the year, doing well for them. And so, they'll always have a hard out-of-conference schedule with who Notre Dame's rivals are. But if he can pull off a couple good wins in there, I don't think there's any stopping him going to the playoffs next year. It's going to be him and BYU fighting for it. Although you could say Army has looked good at the end of this year, so maybe they'll be in there and surprise us. All right, next up is?
All right, next up is the Clemson Tigers with receiving 148 votes. So they are 16th in the poll. They were led by C.J. Logan, or kind of fell off thanks to C.J. Logan as well. I mean, they had a good season overall, but I mean, they did definitely kind of collapse in a lot of people's eyes towards the end of the year. I mean, their losses were to Boston College and Florida State, so they actually wound up finishing third in their division in the ACC. They still are a very good team, though. I mean, give them a lot. Emperor gets a lot of crap just because he tries to talk up his team, but I think we all do. And they did beat Stanford, who is going to the playoffs. So there's that.
People kind of forget that they beat Stanford, but
yeah, I think people just wrote off Stanford and then Clemson as well. But I mean, that is a very good win.
And isn't that Stanford's only loss too?
They have 2 losses. So
they have 2 losses. Okay.
Yeah.
But they went undefeated in conference play, so it must have been some other. Did Stanford lose 2 of like their first 3 games?
Yeah, I think they lost to Notre Dame.
Oh, it's possible, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Anyway. So are we moving on to the next team?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. I'm done.
So next team with just a vote more than Clemson, however, I guess you could say a point more than Clemson, is the Arizona Wildcats. They finished 15th, and it looks like they finished with a 9-3 record. They were 5-2 in conference, and they finished second in the Pac-12 South behind USC. I don't know how many people know about him, but Taylor Rodriguez is a 4 out of 5 redshirt sophomore. He had a really good year: 24 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 70% completion, and over 3,000 yards. So that's one of the more under-the-radar, really good QB seasons this year. And they had a decent defense, if I'm recalling correctly. So definitely a good year for Neo. I know he's sticking at Arizona, so if Rodriguez improves more, I think you could see him contend USC in the next couple of years. All right, next team is?
The Tennessee Volunteers. They received 158 votes. They're led by LDO. They played like nearly every game close on their season. They did not win a lot of games by much. They had a lot of pretty bad games offensively, like the 5-3 shootout in Columbia, South Carolina. But they are still a pretty good team. They beat Georgia, surprisingly. But their losses came against Kentucky and Florida, teams that we don't necessarily think about as good or great teams now. But I mean, these aren't bad teams that they lost to. It's just, the way the SEC was playing out this year. So, yeah.
All right. So next up is the Wisconsin Badgers. They had 162 votes. And by the way, guys, if your wiki's not updated, we're not going to know who you won and lost to, so it's going to be harder to talk about your teams. And so Wisconsin had a Heisman finalist, quarterback Eric Wiegert, and they had 3 losses this year to USC, at Iowa, and obviously the upset against Purdue in Week 8. But I think Badger can definitely take away the Badgers can take away a few good things from this season, and I know they have Lawyer Johnson taking over next year, and that is an awesome name. And so Lawyer Johnson, who's also a 5 out of 5, I think it's Taffy's last chance with a 5 out of 5 quarterback, and so he's going to have to do better next year. I know Iowa and Minnesota are probably going to be his toughest competition, assuming Smoking Cricket does leave Illinois this year, which he has kind of announced, kind of not announced that he's going to do. So depending on that, and depending on how Lawyer can duke it out with Jerry's next year, you could see Wisconsin winning the West.
Okay, so next up at number 12, it is BYU with receiving 184 votes. The Stormin' Mormons. They're a very good team. They have wins against Vanderbilt, Minnesota, Boston College. Houston. So that's four now ranked teams, but their losses are against Georgia and Wisconsin. And those weren't actually very close games. They were both by over 2 touchdowns. So it'll be very interesting to see how things play out for them in the playoffs, since they are the highest ranked, or they are the best independent team. So I'm pretty intrigued to see how they do in the playoffs. I don't know if they'll hold up, but BYU is a very, very good team led by notorious Big EJ.
And so at number 11 is another 10-win team, and that is the Auburn Tigers led by Rome. They do have a very good quarterback, Charlie Taylor, and Lionel Dickinson had 21 touchdowns and 6 yards per carry on 225 carries this year, so that's pretty good for him. And I think overall, Rome came in when they were undefeated, if I'm recalling correctly, and then they lost immediately the next week at Texas A&M. But they only had 2 losses at Texas A&M and at Georgia in division, and obviously the SEC West is a pretty tough division to compete in with a lot of good coaches. And so I think Rome can take away a lot of good things from this year. He had clearly a top 3 recruiting class, 10 wins, and even though he does lose Dickinson to the NFL, I think that Rome can definitely improve on that next year.
Yep.
And so now we're heading to the top 10.
Yep, and quack coming in at number 10, you have the Oregon Ducks receiving 211 votes. They're led by Coach Cade Rich 5 and running back Sean Anderson, who had a fairly good season. You know, he got really hyped up in the Heisman race early on after they probably right after they beat Bama. I think he already went berserk against San Diego State and Fresno State, and then they fell. They came off the bye week really poorly. They lost at Arizona, at Stanford, which are 2 very good losses, actually, and they went out the rest of the way. So they kind of had a tale of 2 seasons, a good start, bad little middle there, and then a good finish as well. So just they didn't do enough in the middle, but still a very good season for the Oregon Ducks. And Cade Rich should feel very, very happy.
And so at number 9, the team that lost in the SEC championship game, we have Texas A&M, who only had 1 loss outside of that this year, and that was to LSU in Week 11. And if you remember correctly, they were in the top 3 heading into that week. So definitely a good year for Double, although I think it would have gone a lot differently if Horace Johnson had remained healthy. If you remember, Horace Johnson had a really good Week 1. And then Week 2 he got injured, and Matty Swift came in and threw 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. So I think that's one of the best storylines of this season, even though no one really talks about it that much. I know Weiss brought it up on the last Around the Horn. And so Matty Swift is going to be at least, well, he's a redshirt freshman, so he could enter the draft next year. But I think it's a good sign for A&M. You know, they only had 1 loss outside of the championship game, so definitely a season to build on, and they still could make the playoffs, could not make the playoffs. Coach's poll isn't that promising, but who knows. Coming in at number 8 is
the USC Trojans, receiving 229 votes, just 9 more than Texas A&M. They're led by quarterback Mike Thomas and departing junior Jerry Rambo. USC, they started off pretty well. They beat Alabama. They beat Wisconsin. They became the number 1 team in the nation. They went to Columbus and lost to Ohio State, which in hindsight is not necessarily as good of a loss as it is, or as good of a loss as it seemed at the time. They also dropped games to Washington and then finally Stanford in the conference championship game. But they are still a very, very good team. They played a lot of their opponents very well. I mean, they beat Alabama, Wisconsin. And it'll be very interesting to see what this team can do.
And coming in at number 7 is Texas Tech. They were undefeated, actually, going into the conference championships, and then they lost on a game-winning touchdown pass by Norris Brookshire with a minute left to lose by 4. And so Texas Tech, you could definitely call it a successful year for them. Some question the strength of their schedule, but they did schedule a couple tough out-of-conference games against Syracuse and against Miami. Well, Miami looked tough at the time. And so they completely obliterated their Big 12 competition. I don't think they allowed a touchdown in Big 12 play at all, which is ridiculous. And so very good defense. They lose their 2 5 out of 5 defensive tackles to the NFL. but great year for Texas Tech. I think Double was up there in the coaches' rankings at number 1 for a while, and so definitely a good year for Texas Tech, and a year they'll want to build on next year.
Texas Tech's head coach is Lambeau Throne, by the way.
Yeah, sorry, Texas A&M, Texas Tech.
Yeah. Next up at number 6 is the Michigan State Spartans, receiving 280 votes, just one above Texas Tech. The Spartans had a pretty good season. They beat Georgia week 1 like everybody else does. They beat North Carolina badly, 38-0. They just completely shut out, touchdown Jesus. But they did lose to Michigan in double overtime, and then they lost to Penn State at Penn State, which is not a bad loss by any means. And they wound up squeaking a win against Notre Dame in quadruple overtime, probably one of the best games the site's ever seen. So this Michigan State team's very talented. They've played a lot of close games. They should be very exciting to watch here in the postseason.
And so next up, we're now in the top 5, and number 5 is Pac-12 champion, the Stanford Cardinal. ALWL doesn't update his page, so screw him, but we already covered his 2 losses, which were to Clemson and Notre Dame in consecutive weeks. And so, they had a really good year winning the Pac-12, which I don't think most expected at the beginning. They won it with a 3.5 at a 3.5 QB in Jason Fowler, who did finish with 22 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, so that's impressive. And their running back, Marshawn Hunter, is a 2.5 at a 3.5, and on just 123 carries, he had 17 touchdowns. So that is blatantly ridiculous. And Stanford, most of their talent is in the receivers and on defense, so the fact that they were able to win with, you could call it a very mediocre quarterback and running back is definitely credit to ALWL. And I think, after losses to Clemson and Notre Dame, most people didn't really think they would do much. But there you go. They went undefeated in the Pac-12 and beat USC to win. So good for them.
All right, so next up at number 4, it's the Dogs, the Georgia Bulldogs, receiving 295 votes. Led by Franz Kafka. The Bulldogs, they had a pretty good season. They did lose week 1 to the Michigan State Spartans in a very close matchup, and they only dropped one more game, and that was to Tennessee. It was a very close game. They had a couple of exciting games going to overtime against Vanderbilt and Texas A&M and the SEC championship game. But this is a very talented team. Their defense really came along towards the end of the season. They made a lot of plays in the last couple of weeks, if I'm remembering correctly. So this Georgia Bulldogs team is very exciting. It'll be interesting to see what they can do.
And so at number 3 is the team I lost to in the ACC championship game, and that would be Florida State. And clearly they had a very good year, although some would probably question their out-of-conference schedule, not the strongest. But they did have Florida scheduled, so that's a credit to them. And obviously their only loss was at Penn State, so not too much question there. Our Achille Wallace, Heisman finalist, he was great. And Dick Cook, one of the greatest names in the history of this site, had a good year running the ball, questionable running the ball, but, that's scrambling quarterbacks in the sim a lot of the time. And so Weiss, won the ACC 3rd year out of 3 tries, and credit to him, even though, competition's getting tougher, he's still dominating the ACC, so he'll have to keep that up.
Okay, so next up at number 2, Boomer Sooner. It's Oklahoma receiving 331 votes, your Big 12 champions. They had a very solid season as well. Even though they lost to Kansas, which I believe they've done every year since Kansas had played them, they lost 23-20, and that was their only loss on the season. They beat a bunch of other teams who are pretty good, in Ohio State and Notre Dame, and then they beat Texas Tech in the conference championship game. Texas Tech had the best defense overall, and Oklahoma's offense has been absolutely ridiculous. They had 4 straight weeks where they put up over 40 points in a game, and that's just unbelievable. It's actually over 42 points. So Oklahoma's offense is very, very threatening. Interesting to see what they can do in the playoffs.
And, the number 1 team in the nation, they got all 14 first-place votes. Clearly the best team in the sim this year, the TCU Horned Frogs. No, I'm just playing. It's Penn State, obviously. What did you say?
I said, are you serious?
So, Penn State, led by the creator of the site, Saluna, Todd Jennings obviously had himself a great year. Pete Cheboyan, I believe it's pronounced, great running back, and Kadeem Martin playing above his overall at cornerback, or overall as we can see in the NFL draft. I think he's still a 5 out of 5. And so, great year for Saluna. He had All-Americans everywhere, and he has guys coming back next year, so he'll definitely be able to contend to go for 12-0 next year. And he's going to be the number 1 seed in the playoffs, number 1 everything, team to beat. I don't know if he'll end up winning, but it sure doesn't look like anyone's going to beat him as of now.
We'll see, I guess. Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the awards portion. We'll do, for everybody watching, we'll do awards, then list the All-Americans, and then go into bowl games and playoff scenarios and stuff. So I guess we'll do, as I said before, I'll do the awards from bottom to top. So I don't know if you guys want to announce the awards, maybe talk about them, and I'll read the award winners.
Okay.
So yeah, that works.
I can do the first one since it's specific to me.
Yeah.
Since it's more of a shout out. I want to thank Inspiral, or as he corrected us today, Inspiral, about his all of his work with the stat stuff and importing it to the wiki every week. And I know I've been on him a bunch of times for getting the NFL one updated, but he's been doing it, so he'll get this year's award for services to the site, because I really do appreciate all the extra work he does that takes some hours of coding, scripting, and other things off of my shoulders. So thank you again, Inspiral. Good luck to your Purdue Boilermakers and in their first ever bowl game. Okay, you guys want to go ahead with the awards?
Dean, you want to take the first one? Or I'll take it. Doesn't matter.
I'll take the first one since you did the poll. The Home Depot Coach of the Year is Lambeau Throne, head coach of the Texas Tech Red Raiders. The Texas Tech Red Raiders, they went 12-1 on the year. Their lone loss was to Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game, and I think that's a huge turnaround from last year. I can't actually recall. Let me pull up their wiki really quick here, see if I can see what the record was last year. And so they went 6-6 last year, so this is a big turnaround. I mean, Lambeau Throne has done a great job as head coach. The defense has been absolutely outstanding, and this award is well deserved. So congrats to Lambeau Throne.
Let me read the award names, please, Dean.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Go ahead, Jumbo.
All right, so next up we have the Ray Guy Award for the best punter in the nation. And the finalists for this award are John Maslowski from USC, Jim Brown from Auburn, Steve Smith from Oklahoma. So it looks like a lot of punters have like real NFL star names. Anyway, Jason Sochia from Notre Dame, Scotty Ware from Clemson, Cliff Randall from Penn State, and A.J. Kinney from West Virginia. And the winner is John Maslowski from USC. He's the best rated punter in the draft, and clearly had a great year, although I can't say anything about his stats because we don't know. So
that should be fixed, obviously, next season, but yes.
Right.
Congratulations to John Maslowski as Dream nets himself some more awards. He's been on a roll for the last 3 years.
Okay, so next up we have the Lou Groza Award, which goes to the best kicker. And am I announcing this, or are you taking it?
You should read the finalists, and I'll read the who wins.
Oh, okay. Where's the finalist list at? I don't actually have that.
I posted it in the chat. So the finalists for the Jim Thorpe, or is it the Jim Thorpe? Yeah. So the finalists for
No.
Is it the Lou Groza?
Lou Groza.
I skipped that one. My bad. So the finalists for the I thought Jim Thorpe was wrong. The finalists for the Lou Groza Award are Nathan Vasquez from Maryland, Dennis Scott from Florida State, Chris Hogue from UCLA, Skip Gibson from Georgia, Ryan Levchik from Alabama, Ronald Daniel from Baylor, and Brian Evans from Florida. And the winner is?
Congratulations to Dennis Scott, kicker from Florida State.
He's been amazing this year. He had 30 attempts and only missed 2 kicks. 12 were from 40+, 5 from 50+, 8 from 30+, and 3 from 20+. And I mean, that's ridiculous. So congrats to Dennis Scott and Weiss.
Congratulations. Next up.
So next up is the Jim Thorpe Award. That's for the best secondary player. And so the finalists are Lee Davis from Oklahoma, Justin Davis from Florida, Kadeem Martin from Penn State, Mike Gradishar from Alabama, Aaron Samuelson from Michigan State, DeAndre Hawkins from Ohio State, and Laurent Christensen from from Army. And the winner is
The Jim
Laurent
Thorpe Award.
Christensen.
Awkward. I meant to read all the names, and you keep taking it from me.
You're not allowed to.
Go ahead.
And so there were a bunch of players that finished with 7 picks, but I guess Christensen was the best in coverage, so congrats to him and congrats to Coach the Writing Waffle. And Saluna, you can read the finalists from now on.
All right, so next up we have the Dick Butkus Award. The nominees for that are Philip Moore of the Houston Cougars, Ryan Hernandez of Maryland, Michael Williams of Pittsburgh, Dalroy Smart of the Washington State Cougars, Kenyatta Henderson of Ole Miss, Kyrese Brown of Wisconsin, and Matthew Romero of Stanford. And the winner is?
The winner of the Dick Butkus Award is Philip Moore. No surprise here, linebacker from Houston. This guy is amazing. I'm sure one of you has the stats pulled up, but he's only in his second year, so we'll see a lot more of this.
Yep. All right. So the next award is the Rotary Lombardi Award for the best defensive lineman in the nation. And the finalists for that are Anthony Ortiz from Oklahoma State, Charles Johnson from Hawaii, Dennis Nyland from USC, Jeremy Miller from Texas Tech, Claxton Robertson from Auburn, Curtis Lewis from Texas, and Ron Rice from Michigan. And the winner is?
The winner of the Rotary Lombardi Award is Jeremy Miller, defensive tackle from Texas Tech.
Does he lead in sacks? Because
Yeah, he does.
He leads in sacks and he's a defensive tackle, and that's just amazing to me because it's all defensive ends, and then you just see that
He
guy
is
there.
the NFL draft as well.
He's crazy.
Yeah, he's all over the place. I believe he has 12 sacks. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's right. He
I think
led
it's
that
13.
Texas Tech run-stopping defense all year. It might be
Yeah.
13.
13 sacks, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown. So
That's pretty amazing.
That's
yeah.
pretty damn good.
Okay.
Whoever gets him in the NFL is going to be happy.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, definitely.
All right, so next up we have the Fred Biletnikoff Award. The nominees are Wes Thomas of USC, Jim Umanura of NC State, Greg Cobb of Cincinnati, Lance Bowling of Stanford, Bo Woodall of North Carolina, Adrian Janikowski of Texas A&M, and Ty Miller of Oklahoma.
The Fred Biletnikoff Award goes to Adrian Jankowski, wide receiver, Texas A&M. He had an absurd stat line this year. He caught almost all of their major balls. I think he was mostly their possession receiver for Texas A&M, so his stats kind of show that.
All right, so next up we have the Doak Walker Award for the best running back in the nation, and the nominees are Sterling Brown from Texas, Michael Schumacher or whatever the hell it is from Northwestern, Lionel Dickinson from Auburn, Marcus Berry from Ohio State, Achille Wallace from Florida State, Michael Duckworth from Michigan State, and Sean Anderson from Oregon.
The 2015 Doak Walker Award goes to Sterling Brown, running back from Texas.
He's very, very good. I mean, he leads the nation in yards and touchdowns, if I'm correct. So I mean,
His yards per carry are slightly less than some of the other finalists.
yeah, I think he's like 6 in yards per carry, right?
Yeah, but his consistent running is pretty impressive. He has a lot more attempts, but his yards per carry isn't that much less than you would expect, and he leads every other running back in the nation by almost 300 yards,
Yeah.
which is impressive no matter how often you run per game.
Okay, so next we have the John Mackey Award, and the finalists for that are Benjamin Carter of ECU, Danny Patrick of North Carolina, Quentin McCullough of Clemson, Jason McLaren of Texas A&M, Scott Brown of Stanford, Brad Richards of Houston, and Walter Lane of LSU.
The 2015 John Mackey Award goes to No-brainer here, really. Danny Patrick, tight end.
Danny Patrick's just
I think of all the awards, this was probably the easiest.
Yeah, I mean, Danny Patrick's way above anybody else I think we've seen at tight end, at least collegiately.
When I think of Danny Patrick, I think of Rob Gronkowski, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it'll show that in the pros. Somebody's going to get somebody really good here, unless the Jets take him with like the 5 overall pick. In which case, he'll Kyle Brady it.
No, you need to become like the Patriots and take your second tight end.
Maybe. I'll consider it.
All right. So next up we have the Outland Trophy. And so the finalists for the Outland Trophy are Quinn Bauman, offensive tackle from Ohio State, Matt Bogle, offensive tackle from Ohio State, Blake Pyle, offensive tackle from USC, Ray Brown, what a cool name, offensive tackle from Florida State, Trey Durance, offensive guard from Alabama, Jace Brown, offensive guard from Florida, and Kevin Seaman, center from Penn State.
Simon.
The 2015 Outland Trophy winner is Kevin Simon, even if Jumbo has slighted his name. Center from
I wasn't
Penn
sure
State.
if it was Simon.
He'll be forever referred to as Seaman from now on.
Last names are ambiguous, okay?
He has the highest rated. Well, I mean, this is how this award is decided, but he has the highest rating for any offensive lineman in college. Pro Football Focus style. Okay. Go ahead.
What was his PFF grade?
Perfect. No, it was pretty good. It was. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to you, but it was essentially the equivalent of like out of 100, it would be like a 99.
Okay.
Okay, so next up we have the Walter Camp Man of the Year Award. And the nominees for that are Charlie Walter of Hawaii, Tommy Jones of Michigan, Joel King of Houston, Brian Houghton of Georgia, Dontrell Jackson of Boise State, Philip Moore of Houston, and Brian Hernandez of Maryland.
The 2015 Walter Camp Man of the Year goes to Charlie Walter from Hawaii. This award's kind of more of a fun award, but I think it's kind of defines itself as like a best character of like underappreciated people on the site. And
Yeah.
Charlie Walter has gotten a lot of respect this year from being like a 3 out of 3 recruit last year, basically unknown to.
Is he 3 out of 4.5 or is he 3 out of
3? Whatever he is, but he wasn't like hyped up at all. So
Yeah.
and
I think he's
got a
3
lot
out
of
of
respect this year. So he's our man.
Yeah.
Yep.
Heating up here, getting towards the end.
All right, and so the second to last award, we have the Davey O'Brien Award. It's for the best quarterback, and the finalists are Mike Thomas from USC, Charlie Taylor from Auburn, Aaron Devereaux from LSU, Eric Wiegert from Wisconsin, Todd Jennings from Penn State, Jarius Jones from Iowa, and hashtag CJ Logan for Heisman from Clemson.
The 2015 Davey O'Brien Award awarded to the best quarterback goes to, and I don't even think this is statistically close, Aaron Devereaux, quarterback, LSU.
He's just kind of a little bit above everybody else, I think. I'm pretty sure like his yards per complete or attempt is a little bit higher than everybody else, and then his yards are pretty big in comparison to the number of passes he's thrown. Because he's not. I don't think he has actually like in the big offenses like Jarius Jones is in and touchdown Jesus is in, but he still threw for like 3,500 yards, and but the touchdown rate is not that great. But
some trouble.
Yeah. I mean, LSU wasn't the greatest, but Devereaux's stats are pretty absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. All right, how do you want to? It's up to you guys how you want to do the Heisman thing. 7-1.
Yeah, I think that's how we should do it.
We can
Talk about
do
each player?
7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, or something.
Okay, we can do. I'll do 7-4-1, I guess, and then we can each talk about them a little bit. You guys can do one person do 6 and 3, and the other one do 5 and 2.
Okay.
Okay. I'll start it off, and that way I can end it. In 7th place in Heisman voting with 26 votes is Philip Moore, linebacker from Houston. We've kind of already touched on him since he won the Dick Butkus Award, but he, I believe, leads the nations in tackles, and he is pretty much the captain of one of the better of the like lower team level defenses. Not a slight at Houston or anything, but they're skill-wise they're not quite up there yet. But he's still a monster on that defense. So I think he. Even though he's in last place of the Heisman finalists, I think he totally deserves to at least be here and be mentioned.
All right, and so number 6 goes to Mike Thomas, quarterback from USC, with 32 total votes. He had a solid year. Dream has always had solid QBs in the sim. But, he had a 71.7% completion percentage for 3,500 yards, 25... Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was reading Devereaux's stats. 2,700 yards, 26 TDs, and 8 picks. And, he actually had the highest QB rating of all of the Heisman finalists, and he also had the highest yards per attempt. But I think what was keeping him down for the most part was the picks, 8 picks. Hard to win a Heisman on this sim with that. But, nothing to be ashamed of, finishing 6th in the Heisman voting, so good for Dream.
Okay, so next up we have Marcus Berry, running back from Ohio State. He's finishing in 5th place. He finished with 49 votes. He had a very good season. He ran for over 1,500 yards. He had over 20 touchdowns. He had a 6.3 yards per carry. He didn't lead any categories, but he was 2 or 3 in all the rushing categories, I think. So he had a very impressive season.
Okay, and in 4th place is Eric Wiegert, quarterback from University of Wisconsin, with 51 votes. Wiegert was actually, for the longest time, my personal favorite to win Heisman, but I feel like somewhere along the line he kind of lost track of it. I can't really put my finger exactly on where that happened, but all around he's got pretty decent stats. He's definitely one of the top quarterbacks in the upcoming draft, and I think a 4th place in the Heisman voting is not going to stop him from tearing up the NFL. So he's definitely still someone good to look at.
And so the 4th place finisher is... Sorry, the 3rd place finisher. I can't speak English. The 3rd place finisher is running back Achille Wallace from Florida State. And, Wallace clearly had a very good year for Weiss. 1,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry, which is patently ridiculous. And so Wallace, great finish, great player, and he'll go on to do great things.
Okay, so in 2nd place was quarterback Aaron Devereaux of LSU. I think he leads the quarterbacks that were nominated for the Heisman in every statistical category except for probably touchdown to interception ratio. He had a very amazing season, but the thing is, LSU wasn't as good of a team. I think this might be what swayed some of the voters towards Jennings. And we can just talk about him now.
Okay. Well, it honors me to present the Heisman Trophy for 2015 to my own quarterback, Todd Jennings. I'm sort of semi-close to fake sim tears here, but Jennings actually, I think, kind of deserves it. It was kind of a weak year for Heisman voters in general. Not to say these people aren't good, but I will concede that I think Devereaux is actually the better quarterback and has performed better. But Jennings overall has had more of a Heisman-type season with events happening alongside his stats.
Yeah.
And I forget what it was exactly, but Bingo sent me a PM a couple weeks ago that pretty much said, I don't remember what game it was. It was when I beat Michigan State, and he said, I'm pretty sure that was Todd Jennings' Heisman moment when we beat them at the very end. So, I'm obviously biased here, but I do think in the end, Todd Jennings probably deserved this, although I could be convinced of Aaron Devereaux as well.
Yep. All right, good stuff.
Okay, that concludes our awards. So for the All-Americans, I will just read them off. Not really sure. We've already mentioned most of these people in awards or finalist lists. So I'll just go ahead and
read them all.
Yeah, I'll just read them all off, and then we can move right on into the bowls. Okay, so your 2015 All-Americans are quarterback Todd Jennings, Penn State, running back Sterling Brown, Texas, fullback Lorenzo Makovica, USC, wide receiver Adrian Jankowski, Texas A&M, wide receiver Ty Miller, Oklahoma. I keep reading the position. Tight end Danny Patrick, North Carolina. Offensive tackles are Blake Pyle, USC, Gray Brown, Florida State. That is the best name ever. Guards are Trey Durance, Alabama, and Jace Brown, Florida. Center, Kevin Simon, Penn State. Defensive ends are Anthony Ortiz and Charles Johnson, Oklahoma State and Hawaii, respectively. Defensive tackle is Jeremy Miller, Texas Tech. The outside linebackers are Brian Hernandez and Kenyatta Henderson from Maryland and Ole Miss. The inside linebackers are Philip Moore, Houston, Ryan Hanspard, Penn State. The defensive backs are, coincidentally, all four cornerbacks: Laurent Christensen, Army; Kadeem Martin, Penn State; Lee Davis, Oklahoma; Justin Davis, Florida. Your special teams unit is composed of kicker Dennis Scott, Florida State, and punter John Maslowski, USC. So congratulations if you have any of these people on your team. That'll be something you can tick up on your wiki, the number of All-Americans you've presented. That's something you should totally be honored by. Maybe not quite as much yet, since you probably haven't recruited these people. Some of these might be. But I think in the coming years, having an All-American that you recruited is going to be extremely satisfying. Yeah, that concludes the awards section of the show, I believe. So if you guys are ready, we can move on to the bowls.
Yay.
I guess I'll read the bowl, and then you guys can talk about the matchup. That's
Okay.
the best way to do this. So we'll start with the bottom. And the lowest bowl that we have is the Bitcoin St. Petersburg Bowl in St. Petersburg, Florida. And it will this year be contested between the Northwestern Wildcats of the Big Ten and the Kentucky Wildcats of the SEC. Wildcat Showdown.
Yep. Northwestern's led by Michael Shoemaker. He's a very good running back, and the Kentucky Wildcats led by Steve McGill. They have a very talented roster. They beat Tennessee at one point during the season, so this will be a very interesting bowl game.
Next up.
Next up is the Bingo's sponsorship Land of 10,000 Lakes Bowl, which I would like to thank Bingo for. He just donated like 3 days ago. It will be held, I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong on this, in Minneapolis. So this will be a very cold bowl, and it'll be between the Alabama Crimson Tide of the SEC and Dean's Ohio State Buckeyes of the Big Ten.
The disappointing season bowl.
Wow, way to just shove Randy out the window.
Well, no. I mean, we both had seasons that were worse than expected. I think we both. It was really just the competition we played.
How fitting is it that your dreams end in Minnesota, in the ice and snow?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a good game. I lost to Alabama last year, and I think we play again sometime in the future, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, I do believe we play again sometime soon. Okay, next up is the Zaxby's. I want some Zaxby's. Zaxby's Heart of Dallas Bowl, contested between the. Oh, it is located, by the way, in Dallas, I believe, at SMU Stadium. It will be contested between the Minnesota Golden Gophers of the Big Ten and SMU, having a home game, the SMU Mustangs of the AAC. Yeah. Congratulations on making a bowl time. It's impressive.
Yeah. So, I'm going to apologize for this ahead of time, but SMU is clearly going to be destroyed in this game. They're coming off of losing TCU, for God's sakes. I mean, come on.
SMU seemed to play up to good competition, though, if I remember correctly. So I think they played pretty well against Georgia earlier on in the season and some other teams.
I mean, Time's scheme changes are completely unpredictable, so whatever he decides to do could pay off for him, but at the same time, I don't know. I mean, Bingo's has a tough team, very good team, and he's coming from a tough conference, so it's tough for me to give it to Time.
Yeah. We'll see. Time can earn himself a lot of respect if he even keeps his
He could pull an axe and pull off the upset.
If he does manage to win, I mean, all credit to him.
Bingo's going to come out swinging, though, so it'll be tough. Okay, next up is the Advocare Texas Bowl, hosted in Houston, Texas. And it will be contested between the Syracuse Orange of the ACC and the LSU Tigers of the SEC.
And so I'm not sure if Gray Aliens is still a coach or not. I'm not sure if he's still on.
Came back. But Syracuse has, I think, the most underrated player on their roster, Chester Dornbos. He's a running back. I think he's 4.5 of 5 or 5 out of 5, and he's got some of the best numbers, and no one ever talks about him. So it'll be interesting to see how he'll do going up against LSU.
Yeah, I think LSU is another SEC disappointment, kind of, with Devereaux finishing 7-5 is a disappointment, and they did even after getting Crimson Chin as coach, they didn't do amazing, and so tough to say who's going to win this one. Because I do think Syracuse is an underrated team.
Yeah, I do think Syracuse is underrated. I feel like they're just missing. They're going to be a lot better next year, I think, because Alan O'Hennessy, their quarterback, is either a 2 of 4.5 or 2.5 of 4. And
I think he's 2.5 of 4.
Okay, or maybe even 2.5 of 4.5. But I think they'll be a lot better next year, assuming that Gray Aliens actually participates a little bit more.
Yeah.
We'll see, I guess. Okay.
Sorry, he's actually a 2 of 4.5.
Say that again? 2 of 4.5? Okay, well, That's not bad. 4.5 potential is pretty good.
Yeah.
So it'll be, I think, something to watch out for in the future. Okay. Up next is Franz Kafka. Thank you for your donation. Franz Kafka's Frozen Bowl held in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and is going to be 15 degrees. So this will be a low-scoring game, I'd imagine, between the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors of the AAC Now Mountain West and the Maryland Terrapins, a new coach, GRV, of the Big Ten.
Yeah. Maryland's a very good team. I think they'll probably want to take this one since Hawaii doesn't have Charlie Walter on their side. But I think they have a very good running back, too, Bass Van Syke or something like that. I don't know his name off the top of my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got anything to say about this matchup, Dumbo? I think it's
tough on Hawaii without Walter,
Yeah.
I feel like if they had Walter, this would be a pretty interesting game with Maryland's pretty decent defense against Hawaii's pretty decent offense, but I'm not sure how Robert Burns is going to do.
Yeah, if you look at Brian Hernandez, it's kind of funny. The linebacker from Maryland, he won the best defensive player in their article for Big Ten awards, which is pretty insane considering how stacked that conference is. And I don't think half the people on this site even know who he is.
That's true.
I think he's got a nickname, though. Don't they call him Man Bear Pig or something? I don't know how that started, but
something like
that. Whenever it comes up.
Up next, we have Discreto Burrito's Mile High Bowl. Thank you, Discreto Burrito. I'm sure Cade will be in attendance at the Mile High Bowl, smoking it up in the back. And it'll be contested between the Pittsburgh Panthers, Jumbo's team, of the ACC, and the Arizona State Sun Devils, now coachless, of the Pac-12.
Well, in my very unbiased opinion, Pittsburgh is going to destroy them, and James Dale will throw for 33 touchdowns. All right, Dean, your opinion?
Kotar.
Kotar balled at his bowl game, I think, against Washington.
I'm sure he did, Dean.
He was so good in college, man. I just don't understand it. But no, Arizona State's kind of had an interesting season too. I think. These are both teams that are both 6 and 6 that finish their seasons.
Yeah.
That's true.
I feel kind of sad that Azul's leaving Arizona State because I think they're a year away from being top 15 material.
Yeah.
So it's gonna kind of be a jet crash now till the end. So until they find a new coach. So it's kind of sad, but we'll see, I guess.
Well, looking at his team, it looks like they benched their 3 out of 4 quarterback who was performing absolutely horribly. 2 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and their new guy, who's only a 3 out of 3, is doing much better. So we'll have to see how that goes.
There might be a scheme change as well.
Could be.
Next up, we have the National University Holiday Bowl in San Diego, California. This is the least illustrious bowl ever. It will be contested between Quasar's California Golden Bears of the Pac-12 and Inspiral's Purdue Boilermakers of the Big Ten.
I just want to bring up that in San Diego, National University ads are the worst ads of all time. All right. Besides,
I don't know what National University is.
Yeah,
it's some for-profit scam college or something like that.
Oh, so it's like DeVry or Phoenix Online or any of those?
Yeah, San Diego has a shit ton of those. I don't know why.
That's funny.
Anyways, but Purdue's offense is actually pretty good. They have Corey Mendoza and Joseph Bowen, if I'm remembering correctly. Their running back's pretty good. He'll be definitely good next year, because I'm pretty sure he is a 4.5 of 5 running back, and he's put up pretty solid numbers.
Corey Mendoza is going to Drew Brees it up in the NFL. Trust me. I'm being serious.
And Inspiral is going to be Inspiral scouting Lester for our first round pick.
Oh yeah. More running quarterbacks that can fail on New York's team. All right.
Just
next
that one
up,
for later.
we have the famous Idaho Potato Bowl in the one place no one ever wants to be in January or the end of December, Boise, Idaho. It'll be contested between the ECU Pirates, Oblivious's team of the ACC, or no, not ACC, sorry, AAC, and Neo's Arizona Wildcats.
This is kind of interesting. I don't think ECU will win this. That'll be probably a pretty close game, though, because I think Oblivious sends his team out pretty well every week. But Neo's team is just something else offensively with Taylor Rodriguez, and I think he'll be a star. His numbers are pretty ridiculous.
I think both of these teams are actually kind of underrated. Both of them.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why the Arizona hype train never took off. And then ECU, I'm not actually. I think they're better than their record is. I don't understand why they. Well, I'm sure you say that since they beat. but I don't know. I guess we'll find out from this game how real the teams are. Up next is, thank you for the donation, Weiss's Weiss Markets Bowl. Only sells Zaxby's, I've been told. It'll take place in the Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina, where this year's Super Bowl also happens to take place. And it'll be contested between the 25th ranked Vanderbilt Commodores and the somewhere in the middle ranked Clemson Tigers.
Yeah, that's a very interesting matchup.
I think it's a really good game.
Yeah, I think that's a really good matchup. But I would have to pick Vanderbilt, if only because Clemson is doomed to lose in a Weiss Bowl.
So how much of a bitch slap is this? Weiss beats Clemson, knocks them out of the playoffs, has at some point purchased a medium-level bowl, and then makes Clemson go to that bowl. He kicked their ass so hard, he sent them to a shitty bowl that's sponsored by him.
That's a great rivalry that's brewing down there. And
I like that rivalry. It's one of my favorite on the site now.
But man, like Vanderbilt, I don't know. Vanderbilt really turned it around because if I'm remembering correctly, they were winless in year one, and now they're ranked in.
That's pretty crazy. 0-12 to 9-3, and barely missing out on the playoffs. That's pretty impressive.
So credit to Sir Wendell there, and I think they definitely do have a chance to win.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, up next is the TaxSlayer.com Gator Bowl. Someone please buy a sponsorship on that. In Jacksonville, Florida. At the Jaguars Stadium. The matchup this year will be the LDO's Tennessee Huskies Volunteers against the Michigan Wolverines Sophos.
Just so you know, I will buy the National University Holiday Bowl just so I never have to see that naming.
You can make a Jumbo University.
Anyways, like the Volunteers and the Wolverines, I think they both kind of have disappointing offenses. Their defenses are both pretty solid, but like their offenses really haven't shown up lately. So it'll be interesting to see the score. It might be pretty low.
I think LDO has two really good defensive players leaving in Darren Manning, and I can't remember the other guy's name. Trent Haynes, yeah. And Michigan struggled without Tommy Jones, but still a solid team. I think it could go either way, although I would definitely give the edge to Tennessee.
Yeah, I think this will be a pretty high-scoring game. I'm looking at like maybe 6-3 by Tennessee standards. So
if it's not 3-2, it's not a normal game.
Well, I mean, scoring twice as many games as that game, but it's going to take a lot of effort from LDO's turn. So we'll see. Next up is Danger Zone's Bourbon Bowl, held in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you for the donation, Danger. And this year it will be held between Illinois, Smoking Crickets, I guess last hurrah at Illinois since he's doing that weird team switching thing, and ETMIV's West Virginia Mountaineers.
This is an interesting game too.
These are two teams that nobody, I think, really expected to kind of be here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Smoking Cricket last year finished it out 1-3, so I don't think that let anyone have any confidence that he would somehow magically finish 8-4 with that roster.
Yeah.
And then West Virginia, I think EMTIV came in of the year. So.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll move on from that. Next up is the New Era Pinstripe Bowl in New York, and this year's matchup I think this is the second time they appeared, and I believe they beat Alabama in this, or the Boise State Broncos, and the now coachless Texas Longhorns. Any opinion? This is Sterling Brown against one of the best run defenses in the country.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see.
I think Boise State, Brett Bolin is a decent quarterback, decent enough that he'll be able to pass on Texas. And so if they can even somehow marginally stop him.
Who's Boise State's running? Dontrell Jackson.
Dontrell Jackson.
Yeah. I always forget about him for some reason.
I mean, last year, his yards per carry was unbelievable. Because I remember I was doing the Heisman preview and I saw that. It was 9.2 or something ridiculous.
I think that's related to the fact that they had Brian Brown. And
I think so too.
Probably. You can run, do some trick plays.
But even so, this year I think he had 6.5 yards per carry, so it's not like it was a huge fluke.
Yeah. He's good.
He's definitely good. Okay, up next is the Hyundai Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas. For some reason, one of my favorite bowls. And this year it'll be held between the Notre Dame Fighting Irish and the Washington Huskies. Go Huskies.
Huh. I don't know what to think about this one.
I
feel like these are both the two most bipolar teams we have on the site, so this is very fitting.
Yeah.
Washington loses the most random games, and Notre Dame is. I don't understand Notre Dame. I really don't. The team either is completely underperforming or completely overperforming in completely random games. So we'll see.
Yeah. Washington cannot do worse than their bowl performance last year, so they have that going for them.
Dean has to hang on to one thing.
I think this game's probably important for Harold Simmons' draft stock too, because I know he's an 80 coming out, but no one really cares. He underperformed in college consistently, too hot and cold for most people.
I think a lot of people in the NFL especially need to realize that the bowls that are the good bowls but aren't the playoff bowls should give you a decent indication of how people will perform in the NFL, and I would really recommend using these top bowls as a scouting tool.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, we'll see. I think this will be a good indication of a lot of things going Notre Dame's way. Up next is the Outback Bowl in Tampa, Florida, at the Buccaneers Stadium. And this year's matchup will be the Auburn Tigers against the Wisconsin Badgers. Very good game, I think.
Yeah, it's a very good game. Wisconsin has the number 3 pass defense, which was weird because I actually saw that stat and I was like, what? Because I think of them as a pass offense.
Yeah, that's weird. Well, they have Matt Cohen, who's a very good corner. So this will be interesting. It'll be Rome and Taffy owner, and I think both of them are pretty good at what they do. So it should be a decent matchup.
Yeah, I think in the end, Wiegert may just be a better quarterback than Taylor, and I don't think Auburn has a corner that it's on the caliber of Cowan, so that may be the deciding factor.
Yeah. I think both of these teams will be teams to watch out for next year. Both of them. Yeah. I think Wisconsin doesn't really get any worse with Laurie Johnson.
And they have actual 5 potential running back that's coming up too.
What's his name?
I don't actually know his name, but I know that he's replacing Fuller.
He's replacing Fuller. Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway.
And then Auburn's going to get Ja'Cory Kessler, who I am very scared of. I think he fits into that offense extremely well. And I really wouldn't be surprised if Auburn's there at the very end of the season. But, I mean, we'll see. That's all to be written.
You just gave Rome a huge boner. He's freaking out right now.
I'm sure it did. But, like I said, Wisconsin, too. I think Wisconsin might be one of the favorites for the Big Ten title. Their team is – I was looking at it yesterday, and looks pretty solid. It's got no real weakness. It's not super flashy in a lot of places, but it reminds me a lot of my team this year, where it's kind of good all around, but not great, which is all you need, really.
Well, clearly it works if you can follow Penn State from this year's model.
I definitely overachieved this year. I did not expect to go 12-0. I don't really understand how that happened. I don't know.
I mean, you had the best offensive lineman and one of the best corners and the Heisman winner, so in the end, it's not that surprising, but
that's definitely true. Up next is the Russell Athletic Bowl, held in beautiful Orlando, Florida, about 5 miles from my house. So this one will be held between the Boston College Eagles, Jumanji, a new coach, and the coachless but solid Houston Cougars. What do you think about this?
I actually love this matchup between Alex DeShore and Joel King, two really good freshman quarterbacks. I think that'll be an interesting thing to see who comes out on top and who can perform well.
I think this game is actually kind of interesting because this shows our progression away from the initial generating class. Yeah. Generated teams 3 seasons ago pretty well. I mean, who would have thought that like Boston College versus Houston is one of the better upcoming bowls?
Yeah, that's true.
It's a very interesting matchup, I think.
I agree.
Okay, and then the last non-title implication bowl will be the Buffalo Wild Wings Citrus Bowl, and this will be between the Texas A&M Aggies and the Iowa Hawkeyes.
So many passing touchdowns in this game.
Yeah, I was. Well, I don't know. Actually, Iowa held me to 16 points. So
oh yeah, that's true.
Sort of.
I think a lot of people are going to be pissed that Texas A&M isn't in the playoffs, but tough decision in the end.
Honestly, I think this is the bowl. This is the game between the two people that could have replaced anybody else in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I know people didn't value Iowa as high, but I think Iowa is one of the other good teams that got kind of snubbed. So Iowa against Texas A&M is at least a pretty good consolidated bowl.
And Matty Swift versus Jarius Jones is definitely a good QB matchup too. Outside of that, I mean, not too much to say about these teams except they're both really, really, really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm curious to see how this game ends up. This could be like a 10-9 or like a 49-45 type game.
Oh yeah.
So we'll see. Okay, and with that, we move on to our very first expanded playoff situation.
Yay.
With the play-in game in Honolulu, known as the Hawaii Bowl, and it will be between two at-large teams since the AAC did not send a conference champion this year, and it will be the Texas Tech Red Raiders against the USC Trojans. I am so unbelievably pumped for these playoffs. These are like super juggernaut matchups. I love it.
That is actually a really awesome matchup. I mean, if you look at Texas Tech's defense, that is it's probably the most insane defense we've seen in this sim so far, I'd have to say. And that against, Dreams QBs who've all been really good. I think it's a close one to call. It's up to Texas Tech's offense to put up points like they couldn't in the Big 12 championship.
Did we skip over the Alamo Bowl?
Yeah, I did skip over the Alamo Bowl.
The Alamo Bowl doesn't count.
Before causing some minor freakouts, I did miss the Valero Alamo Bowl in San Antonio, Texas. I'm sure somebody's quacking a lot. It is between Stormstoppers, Kansas Jayhawks, and the Oregon Ducks. I don't know. We can talk about it for a little while, I suppose. I think this is probably a pretty good game, although Kansas, not really sure what happened near the end of the season. But I think it'll still be a pretty decent game because Kansas's quarterback kind of should be able to carve up Oregon's defense pretty well, and I think Oregon's offense will kind of destroy Kansas's defense. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
If you remember, Kansas's quarterback is not the greatest. If you remember his performance against, it was either Kansas State, I think it was Kansas State, where he went like 8 for 20 with 4 interceptions and like 50 yards. He's a scrambler.
Yeah, but he's also had games where he threw for like 200 yards and ran for 200. So I guess we'll depend on what side of the bed he gets up.
Well, how good is Oregon's defense? Is it like porous bad?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think it's bad. I think it's like mediocre, but this is like some of the best teams in the country, so
yeah,
it doesn't necessarily cut it.
Bad.
They have a good corner, Corey Quinn. And then the linebackers are Najee Blue, Kendall Missler, and Major Olbrich, I think. I'm trying this off the top of my head. So if those names don't ring any bells, that probably tells you what's going to go on there.
Yep.
I think it'll be a pretty good game. It'll be like super high scoring. It should be fun.
I think, yeah, it'll be a fun box score to look at.
Okay, going back to the playoffs. So the winner of the Texas Tech USC game will face Penn State. Face me at the Orange Bowl down in Miami.
It's probably the least surprising announcement we'll get.
That's why I did it first, because it's kind of straight up.
Well, the only undefeated team, number 1. Call me shocked.
So the winner of that game will then face off against the winner of Georgia and Stanford, who are playing in the Sugar Bowl in, where's the Sugar Bowl? Louisiana? New Orleans?
Yeah.
In New Orleans. Yeah. So Georgia, Stanford, the winner plays the winner of Penn State, Texas Tech, USC.
I think that'll be an interesting one for sure. Maybe we'll see if Kafka Curse extends to the playoffs.
Oh God, he's the keeper of the curse. Stanford. I don't think
if Stanford makes it to the Final Four, that may be one of the most surprising things to happen on this site.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, if he does that, then ALWL after winning the Super Bowl is totally legit and might be one of the best coaches on the site.
Yeah.
Be scared of that at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. The number 2 seeded team is the Oklahoma Sooners, and they will be taking on number 7 seeded Michigan State Spartans in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas,
That's going to be a good one.
I think that's the best matchup.
Like, best offense against a very good defense.
This is going to be an extremely low-scoring game, I think.
I mean, you got Brookshire against the no-fly zone, so
yeah.
I think that'll be interesting to see how that
goes. Lewis and Michael Duckworth against one of the best run defenses.
Yes, that's the thing. I don't think Michigan State can score in Oklahoma. I just don't think he can because it's one-dimensional.
I think if Slinky had a quarterback, he'd probably win the national championship this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A legit offense.
He'll probably go after that one of the 5 potential quarterbacks in the Midwest this year.
I'm not going to take anything away from Slinky, though, because 2 years ago he had literally nothing, and he's built up a defense that's super respectable. And then the final game, the winner of Oklahoma, Michigan State will take on the winner of the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, Florida State and Weiss against BYU and notorious Biggie. Any opinions on this game? BYU also a good defense, and Florida State a good offense. So very similar to some of the other matchups we've seen.
I don't remember who pointed it out, but someone said BYU struggled against good teams for the most part, and I mean they finished 10-2, so no disrespect there. But I think Florida State's got to be the clear favorite.
Yeah, I think no slight to Notorious, but I think this is probably the least likely bowl game to be won by the lower seed.
Yeah.
I honestly even think that Texas Tech or USC probably has a better chance against me.
I mean, BYU doesn't have the greatest offense. I think they have a 3.5 out of 3.5 running back, and
I think they won't get blown out, but it'll be kind of a maybe a 30-14 kind of game or something like that.
I mean, I was able to score points on them by throwing the shit out of the ball, but I don't think BYU necessarily has the capability to do that.
The fact that BYU is even here should be cause for celebration for Notorious. That's
Definitely.
Pretty impressive.
I mean, no disrespect to him at all. He's in the playoffs, so I mean, can't hate on that.
Yeah. I guess we'll see. I know some people want to do a bracket for the playoffs on the site. So
yeah. Just as an announcement, if you're doing betting, I'm going to be doing a confidence picks competition. So how ESPN does the confidence picks, I'm just going to do all the bowls, and you can pick in order your confidence of who's going to win. And whoever gets the most points will receive a cash prize for betting next year.
Oh, cool. Man. Time to get some fake money.
Yeah.
Rain. Okay, and I will post all of the stuff that we just talked about in appropriate forums in the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And I will update the wiki. Apparently, some people, as mostly ALWL, didn't know that the wiki even exists. I'm not really sure how this is possible, considering that it's mentioned all the time, and we use the links for a lot of things. I guess I'll use this shout out to update your damn wiki, people, please. Not even the player stuff. Just update your team wiki and that kind of important stuff. Have your conference commissioners update the championship game wikis, and I'll do the overall season stuff so we can save all this stuff before we have the reason I'm pushing this so much is I'm scared that we're gonna have a day where something happens with the server and we're gonna lose a lot of data on the site. The wiki is backed up onto my private hard drive automatically once a day, so if we have it on there, we can't lose it.
And Saluna mentioned it earlier, but on the front page of the wiki, there is a work needed page and a style guidelines page. You can click to both of those if you need help on how to make a wiki page or how to edit yours.
Correct. And with that, I want to thank Dean and Jumbo for taking 2 hours today, or I guess an hour and a half. And getting this set up with me is much better than doing it by myself. So I can at least bounce some stuff off of some other people. And maybe we can continue. I don't know if you guys want to do this or whoever wants to join me for the NFL draft in like a month.
Oh, yeah, I'm in for that.
Yeah, I'd probably be up for it.
That'll be. I'm going to try to work on it a little bit production value wise once I can think of something. But yeah, you guys are invited to that. With that, I guess we're done.
All right, so this has
been fun.
The HC Award and Bowl Selection Show. I'm Dean Craig Pelton signing off.
Goodbye, guys.